Hello everyone. I am Dreaming Stories and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep. So before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. The first day felt like paradise. The rented beach house stood on stilts above the pale sand, its wooden deck bleached gray from years of salt and sun. A salt-stained flag flapped lazily in the breeze, and the sea stretched endless and blue in front of them, whispering in waves that rolled gently ashore. "Perfect," said Mariah, dropping her duffel bag onto the deck with a heavy thud. She shaded her eyes with one hand, grinning at the others. 3 whole weeks. No classes, no jobs, no stress. Behind her, Jason struggled with the cooler. His sunburned shoulders gleamed with sweat, and his flip-flops slapped against the wooden steps. "No Wi-Fi either," he said, breathing heavily. "You guys sure this is a good idea?" "Don't start," laughed Tasha, slipping her sunglasses up into her braids. She ran her hands along the rail, testing it, then leaned over to look at the beach below. "This is the kind of place you come to actually relax. Like, remember life before TikTok." Luis was last, hauling 2 oversized grocery bags, his shirt already spotted with condensation from the beer inside. "Yeah, and if we're lucky, Jason will go 3 days before having a panic attack from notification withdrawal." Jason set the cooler down with a grunt. Hilarious. The house was old but sturdy, its interior filled with mismatched furniture and the faint smell of brine. The windows looked out onto the beach, and when the tide came in, the water would nearly lick the stilts that supported the place. By late afternoon, they were settled. Food packed away, swimsuits pulled on, sun lotion applied in uneven streaks. The friends tumbled down the wooden stairs to the sand, whooping as they ran toward the waves. The water was cold but inviting, the kind of cold that bit at the skin but promised refreshment the longer they stayed. Mariah floated on her back, her eyes shut. Jason tossed a frisbee clumsily toward Luis, who dove to catch it and ended up sputtering when a wave smacked him in the face. Tasha sat near the shoreline, toes buried in the wet sand, humming to herself. By sunset, they dragged themselves back to the porch, salty-haired and sun-dazed. Dinner was tacos from a stand in town, washed down with cheap beer and the laughter that only came with old friends who didn't care how ridiculous they looked chewing with their mouths full. When night fell, the ocean kept whispering. They stayed out on the deck, a string of dim porch lights their only glow, and watched the moon rise over the waves. The surf was darker now, reflecting silver light as it rolled in steady rhythms. Jason leaned against the railing, sipping his beer. It's crazy to think how much of the ocean's unexplored. Like, there could be anything out there." "Like what?" Tasha teased. "Mermaids? Sea monsters? Could be." Jason shrugged. "Giant squids? New species? Stuff that shouldn't exist." Luis chuckled. "You're already spooked, huh?" "I'm just saying," Jason replied, his voice quieter now. "That water feels endless." The others let it slide. They were tired, full, and the ocean was soothing in its monotony. It wasn't until Tasha went inside for more chips that she noticed something. Guys?" Her voice carried back to the porch, uncertain. The others looked up. She was standing at the bottom of the stairs now, barefoot on the cool sand, pointing toward the shoreline. "What is it?" Mariah called. Tasha hesitated. Then she gestured for them to come down. They joined her, feet sinking into the damp sand. The tide was pulling back, leaving behind lines of foam that clung to the beach. And cutting through that foam were footprints. Not theirs. "Whoa," Luis said, crouching low. He brushed the edge of one with his hand. "That's big." The print was easily twice the size of a man's. Wide, long, the toes splayed strangely. The impression was deep, as though whatever made it carried enormous weight. Jason frowned. No way that's human. Probably just, messed up from the tide, Mariah offered, though her voice wavered. But the tracks didn't wander randomly the way distorted prints usually did. They formed a clear trail, wet impressions leading directly from the black sheen of the water up the beach. And ending at the first step of their porch. The friends stood in silence, listening to the ocean hiss against the shore. Then Luis laughed, though it was forced. Okay. Creepy. But it's just, some fisherman with big boots, right? Or, like, some prank. Jason shook his head. Boots don't look like that. Well, Tasha said, folding her arms tight against her chest, whatever it was, it's gone now. They exchanged uneasy glances before heading back upstairs. None of them wanted to admit it, but they checked the locks on the sliding glass door twice before going to bed. The next morning, sunlight burned the memory away. Mariah brewed coffee, humming as the kitchen filled with its warm aroma. Luis fried eggs on a pan that hissed too loud for conversation. Jason and Tasha wandered out to the deck, stretching, their eyes squinting against the glare on the waves. And then they saw them. Fresh footprints. Leading out of the sea again, straighter this time. Deeper. Ending just 2 steps from the porch. Jason swore softly. It came back. This time, the laughter didn't come so easily. That night, despite their unease, the friends tried to pretend nothing was wrong. They played cards, drank more than usual, and told stories to chase away the creeping feeling of being watched. But when Luis went inside to grab another round of beers, he froze at the window. The moonlit sand below gleamed wet. And fresh prints had appeared, soaking, heavy, so close now that they brushed against the very edge of the stairs. Luis whispered, "It's here." The 4th night, Jason went missing. He'd gone out for a midnight swim, laughing off Mariah's warning to not become shark food. They watched him wade into the black water, his pale chest gleaming under the moonlight. He dove beneath a wave, arms cutting cleanly through the surface. He never came back up. The others shouted, ran into the surf, dragged their feet through the cold water until their legs were numb. But there was no sign of Jason, not a ripple, not a gasp, not even a shadow moving below. And when they stumbled back onto the sand, shivering, they saw a new set of prints. Larger now. Deeper. This time, they weren't leading from the water to the house. They were leading from the house back into the sea. And beside them, faint but undeniable, were Jason's. The ocean had brought something in. For the first time since they'd arrived, the beach house felt like a trap. Mariah sat at the kitchen table, knees drawn up, staring blankly at the condensation rolling down her untouched glass of water. Her hair was still wet, tangled from the salt, and she hadn't bothered to change out of her swimsuit. She just sat there, silent, as the hum of the old refrigerator filled the air. Luis paced the length of the room, his bare feet thumping against the wood. He kept running a hand through his curls, muttering, "No, no, no, no," under his breath as if saying it enough times might undo what had happened. Tasha leaned against the counter, arms crossed so tight across her chest it looked like she was holding herself together. Her nails dug into her skin, but she didn't seem to notice. They hadn't spoken much since they dragged themselves back from the ocean, screaming Jason's name until their throats ached. There had been no answer, no thrashing, no cry for help. Just the steady push and pull of the tide, indifferent to their panic. Finally, Luis broke the silence. "We have to call someone." His voice cracked. "The police, Coast Guard, somebody. We can't just." "There's no signal," Mariah cut in flatly. Her eyes didn't leave the table. "I already tried. No bars. Nothing." That was before, Louise snapped. We can try again. Maybe the wind shifted or... I walked around the whole house, Mariah said, finally looking up. Her eyes were red and glassy. Not a single bar. It's dead out here. Luis cursed, slamming his fist against the wall. The hollow sound echoed, loud in the small kitchen. Tasha spoke quietly, her voice strained. We should leave. Luis turned, his face pale but tight with resolve. What, on foot? There's nothing around for miles. No neighbors, no shops. It was like an hour's drive from town, remember? Through nothing but dunes and marshes. Mariah whispered, the car. Luis froze. He hadn't even thought of it in the panic. Their rental sat in the driveway behind the house, shielded by a line of crooked palms. They looked at each other, the same thought passing silently between them. If they left now, maybe they'd make it back before the tide brought whatever it was in again. But when they pushed open the door and stepped onto the porch, the thought evaporated. The footprints were back. And this time, there were dozens. Not just one trail leading from the sea to the house, but several. Some small, some huge, some dragging strange, slithering lines through the sand. They crisscrossed the beach like a gathering crowd, all converging at the stairs. Luis swore and stumbled backward, nearly tripping over his own feet. They're multiplying, Mariah whispered, her voice thin and trembling. No, Tasha said. They've always been there. We just didn't see them. The words made Mariah's stomach twist. She gripped the railing, staring down at the prints. The sand still glistened with fresh moisture, though the tide was a good 20 feet away. The marks hadn't been there long. Luis shook his head furiously. We're not staying. We're getting in the car, driving until we hit town, I don't care how far. We'll sleep in the damn parking lot if we have to. They didn't argue. The three of them scrambled down the stairs, their hearts pounding as their bare feet sank into the cold, wet sand. The prints seemed to pulse in the moonlight, black shadows against silver grains. The car came into view, parked crookedly where they'd left it after unloading. Luis fumbled in his pocket for the keys, cursing when they slipped through his trembling fingers. Come on, he muttered. He jammed the key fob, and the headlights blinked once, cutting a harsh beam across the beach. Mariah was the first to notice. Wait, she whispered, but the word caught in her throat. The windshield. It wasn't intact anymore. The glass was spiderwebbed with cracks, the driver's side completely shattered inward. A smell wafted from the car, wet, briny, like fish left too long in the sun. Something had been inside. No, Luis whispered, shaking his head. No, this can't. Luis, Tasha said sharply, grabbing his arm. Look. The seats were soaked. Salt water pooled in the grooves, dripping onto the floor mats. And there, pressed into the leather like fossil imprints, were more of those strange, oversized prints. Mariah gagged, covering her mouth. We can't use it, Tasha said firmly. Her voice quivered, but her words were steady. It's ruined. Whatever it was, it didn't want us to leave. Luis's breathing grew ragged. He pressed his fists against his forehead, eyes squeezed shut. So what then? We just wait here. Let them, come back until we're all. We'll make it till morning, Tasha said. Someone will notice we're gone. If we hike inland at dawn, we'll find the road. And in the meantime... Mariah's voice rose, shrill with panic. What if it comes back tonight? What if it... Her words died. Because just then, from the direction of the shoreline, came a sound. A low, wet dragging noise. Like something heavy pulling itself across the sand. All three froze, their breath catching. The sound was steady, rhythmic, growing closer with each scrape. Luis swallowed hard. Back inside. Now. They ran. The porch boards rattled beneath their feet as they scrambled up the stairs and slammed the door shut behind them. Luis fumbled with the lock, hands shaking so badly he missed twice before finally sliding it into place. Then silence. The dragging stopped. They waited, pressed against the wall, listening to their own uneven breaths. And then, a creak. Not from outside. From inside the house. The sound was unmistakable, a floorboard groaning under weight that should not have been there. Mariah's hand shot to her mouth, stifling a gasp. Luis's eyes darted toward the narrow hallway that led deeper into the house, his chest heaving like a cornered animal's. Tasha, pressed against the door, whispered just one word. Upstairs. They moved together, silent but frantic, creeping toward the staircase that rose from the living room to the small loft above. Every creak of their feet on the old boards felt like a gunshot in the dark. Halfway up, Luis risked a glance back. The kitchen was dim, bathed only in the faint light of the moon through the window. At first, nothing stirred. Then, movement. A shadow stretched unnaturally long across the tiles, dragging itself forward in uneven pulls. Something wet gleamed faintly as it slid over the counter. Luis's stomach lurched. He turned and shoved Mariah upward. Go. Faster. They clambered up the stairs, stumbling into the loft. It wasn't much, just two beds pushed against the wall, a dresser, and a small window that looked out onto the beach. They slammed the flimsy door shut and locked it, though the knob rattled in its socket as if protesting the effort. For a moment, the only sound was their ragged breathing. Then. Thump. Something below hit the wall, hard enough to make the pictures rattle. Thump. Closer now. The sound of dragging, then a wet slap, like something heavy hitting the floor. Mariah was trembling, clutching her knees on the bed. What does it want? She whispered. Tasha's voice was low but firm. It wants us in the water. Luis pressed his ear to the door, his jaw clenched. It's moving around down there. Searching. His voice cracked. Like it knows we're hiding. The sound of the refrigerator door squealing open. Something clattering to the floor. Then silence, followed by the faintest squelch, as if something soft and fleshy pressed against the kitchen tile. Luis stepped back, his face pale. It's eating. They huddled together on the bed, the wooden slats creaking beneath their combined weight. Minutes stretched into hours, or maybe it was only minutes. Time lost all shape, blurred into the rhythm of those wet, dragging sounds below. Eventually, silence returned. But silence didn't feel safe anymore. The next morning, the house reeked of rot. When they finally crept downstairs, blinking against the sunlight that streamed through the windows, the sight made Mariah gag. The kitchen was wrecked. The fridge stood open, its contents spilled across the floor. Milk soured in broken cartons. Fruit was smashed, pulp smeared across the tiles. And scattered. Between it all were patches of seaweed, glistening green and black, as though torn fresh from the ocean floor. And on the counter, Jason's phone. Mariah froze, her chest tightening. She snatched it up with shaking hands, nearly dropping it when she saw the screen was wet, the glass fogged from salt. She jabbed at the power button. The screen lit up. Her breath caught. It works. But the relief dissolved as she realized what was on the display. The camera app was open. The gallery showed dozens of new images, all time-stamped just hours ago. The same photo. Over and over. Taken from the edge of the bed where they'd slept. Photos of her, Luis, and Tasha, curled together in the loft, unaware. Mariah dropped the phone with a strangled cry. It clattered to the floor, the last photo frozen on the screen, a close-up of her face, eyes shut in restless sleep, hair tangled across the pillow. Luis swore under his breath, running both hands through his hair. That's it. I'm done. We're not waiting for dawn or hoping for rescue. We're leaving now. I don't care if we have to walk 20 miles barefoot. But the tracks, Tasha began. I don't care, he snapped, his voice shaking. We stay here, we die. It's that simple. They argued, voices rising and falling in panicked waves, but in the end, there was no other choice. They packed what little they could carry, water bottles, a few granola bars, Mariah's inhaler, and by mid-morning, they set off inland, away from the sea. The sand burned hot underfoot, forcing them to trudge in awkward bursts between patches of shade. The marsh grass buzzed with insects, the air heavy with humidity. Sweat slicked their skin, and every distant crash of the waves felt like a reminder that the ocean was watching. By noon, their legs ached, their mouths dry. The horizon shimmered with heat, but no road appeared. Then Mariah spotted something ahead. A cabin. Small, weather-beaten, half-hidden behind a stand of palmettos. Thank God, Luis muttered, breaking into a limping jog. But as they drew closer, hope curdled into dread. The door of the cabin hung open, swinging slightly in the breeze. The steps were soaked, darkened with damp. And on the sand before it, clear as day, were prints. Fresh ones. Leading inside. The three of them stopped short, the humid air pressing against their lungs as they stared at the open cabin door. Mariah clutched Luis's arm, her nails biting into his skin. We're not going in there. Luis wiped sweat from his forehead, his face set but pale. We don't have a choice. It's shelter. It's bait, Tasha said. Her voice was low, controlled, but her eyes betrayed the panic rising in her. Look at the door. Look at the steps. It's waiting for us. Luis turned on her, anger flashing as much from fear as from frustration. So what, we just collapse out here? Die in the heat? We need water, we need. He cut off, his words strangled. From inside the cabin, something moved. A soft scrape against wood. A whisper of fabric dragging. The three of them went still as statues. Then, from the darkness of the open doorway, a sound. Help. Mariah's head snapped toward the cabin, her chest tightening. The voice was faint, hoarse, human. Jason's voice. No, she whispered. That's impossible. Luis stepped forward, eyes wide. Jason. Don't, Tasha hissed, grabbing his wrist. That's not him. You know that's not him. Help. The voice was louder now, clearer. It cracked in the middle, as though spoken through waterlogged lungs. Please, it's so dark. Mariah's throat closed. She wanted to believe it. She wanted to run into that cabin and pull Jason into her arms, to feel his laugh again, to hear him complain about sand in his shoes. But she remembered the prints, Jason's prints, leading into the sea. And she remembered the phone. The photos. It wasn't Jason. Luis, she whispered, her voice shaking. That's not him. But Luis was already moving. He yanked free of Tasha's grip and stumbled up the steps, his sandals slipping on the damp wood. The open door loomed before him, dark and yawning. Jason. His voice cracked. I'm here, man, I'm. The doorway swallowed him. Mariah's breath hitched. She took an involuntary step forward, but Tasha grabbed her arm and pulled her back. No, Tasha said sharply. Don't you dare. The silence that followed was unbearable. Every heartbeat felt like an hour. The only sounds were the buzz of insects and the faint hiss of waves behind them. Then Louise screamed. It wasn't a word, it was raw, animal, a tearing sound that ripped through the heavy air. It echoed across the marsh, cutting off suddenly as though choked underwater. Mariah jerked forward, but Tasha held her fast. Her own face was white, her lips pressed thin. We can't save him. Mariah's eyes filled with tears. We can't just. Do you want to die too? Tasha snapped, her whisper sharp as a blade. The cabin door slammed shut. The echo of it rolled across the sand like thunder. Mariah's sobs shook her whole body, but Tasha gripped her shoulders hard. Listen to me. We have to keep moving. If we stay here, we're next. Do you understand? Mariah nodded weakly, though every instinct screamed to run into that cabin and drag Louise out by force. But deep down, she knew what she would find. Not Louise. Not anymore. They turned and stumbled away from the cabin, back into the blistering sun. The rest of the day blurred into heat and exhaustion. They walked without speaking, their throats raw, their minds looping through the same questions. What was it? How many were there? Why them? When the sun finally dipped, painting the marsh in orange light, they collapsed beneath a cluster of palms. Mariah curled on the ground, her chest hitching with dry sobs. Tasha sat rigid, eyes scanning the horizon as if sheer vigilance could hold back the tide. But when the first stars appeared, so did the sound. The dragging. Slow, deliberate, wet. It came from behind them, back toward the coast. Mariah clamped a hand over her mouth. Tears spilled silently as she shook her head. Not again, not again. Tasha's jaw clenched. She gripped a broken branch she'd found earlier, brandishing it like a spear though it was hardly more than a stick. The dragging grew louder. Closer. Then it stopped. For a long moment, nothing. Then, from the darkness behind the palms. Mariah. Her heart stopped. It was Louise's voice. Weak, broken, but his. Mariah, please, it hurts. She shook her head violently, pressing her palms to her ears. No. No, you're dead. Tasha hissed, don't answer it. But the voice came again, trembling with pain. They wouldn't let me go. Please, help me. Mariah's eyes squeezed shut, tears burning hot. She wanted to scream, wanted to cover her ears and drown out the sound. And then she realized something that made her blood run cold. The voice wasn't coming from one place. It was all around them. As though the marsh itself whispered Louise's agony from every shadow. Tasha grabbed Mariah's wrist. Run. And together, they bolted into the night. They ran blind through the marsh. Branches whipped at their arms, palmetto fronds sliced across their legs, mud sucked at their feet. The night air was thick with salt and humidity, every breath tasting of copper and brine. Behind them, the voices followed. Mariah. Tasha. Not just Louise anymore. Jason too. The two voices overlapped, echoing strangely, like they were being pulled through water. Sometimes they sounded far away, other times so close that Mariah swore she felt warm breath brush her ear. Tasha dragged her along, never loosening her grip, her broken branch clenched in her other hand. Don't stop, she panted. Don't look back. But Mariah did. And instantly wished she hadn't. The darkness seemed to ripple. Shapes moved against the moonlight, long-limbed, hunched, glistening. Their bodies were wrong, parts too thin, others too swollen, as though the sea itself had twisted them to fit its design. Their feet slapped wetly on the ground, leaving shimmering prints that steamed faintly in the night air. And their faces. God, their faces. She saw Jason's jawline, Luis's shoulders, but stretched, waterlogged, pallid. Their eyes were pools of black, reflecting the moon. Their mouths hung slack, whispering words that no longer belonged to them. Mariah's scream caught in her throat, torn away by the wind. Faster. Tasha yanked her forward, her grip bruising. They tore through the brush until the marsh gave way to higher ground. Ahead, through the trees, something loomed, tall and angular. Look! Tasha gasped. A tower. It rose from the clearing, an old watchtower, rusted and leaning but still intact. Its ladder stretched up into the dark, rungs glinting faintly in the moonlight. They didn't think. They ran. Tasha shoved Mariah toward the ladder. Climb. Mariah scrambled upward, her hands slipping on the damp metal, splinters biting her palms where the wood had rotted. She hauled herself rung by rung until she reached the platform at the top, collapsing against the railing. Below, Tasha followed fast, but not fast enough. The dragging grew louder. The shadows closed in. Go, go. Mariah screamed, reaching down. Tasha grabbed the final rung, hauling herself up as something lunged from the tree-lean. A hand, webbed, pallid, slick, clawed for her ankle. She kicked, striking bone, and yanked herself onto the platform. The thing slammed into the base of the tower, the whole structure shuddering under the impact. Mariah clung to Tasha, both of them pressed against the railing, staring down in horror. Below, the creatures gathered. Not just one or two. Dozens. Some dragged themselves on hands that bent the wrong way. Others swayed on legs too long for their bodies. All of them stared up with black, glassy eyes. And all of them whispered. Come back, come back. The tower groaned as they began to climb. Wet hands slapped against the ladder, slick bodies scraping upward. Mariah's stomach lurched. They're coming up. Tasha raised her makeshift spear, her voice trembling but fierce. Then we make them fall. The first creature's head rose over the edge. Its skin was pale and torn, seaweed tangled in its hair. Its mouth stretched open, wider than any human mouth should. Mariah screamed as Tasha swung. The branch cracked across its face with a sickening thud. The creature toppled backward, shrieking as it hit the others below. But more came. Hands clawed over the railing, grasping, pulling. One latched onto Mariah's wrist, its grip slimy and crushing. She cried out, struggling, until Tasha brought the branch down hard, snapping brittle fingers. They fought like cornered animals, swinging and kicking, every movement fueled by raw terror. For every one they knocked loose, two more climbed higher. Then the wood beneath them groaned. Mariah's eyes widened. The tower. It was too old, too weak to hold so much weight. The support splintered, the whole structure tilting dangerously. Nails screeched as they tore from rotten beams. Tasha's face went white. We have to jump. What? Mariah shrieked. It's 20 feet. It's that or go down with it. The tower lurched, tilting farther. Below, the sea things shrieked, their voices a chorus of distorted human pleas. The ladder ripped away with a crash, sending a wave of them tumbling into the mud. The platform tilted violently. Tasha grabbed Mariah's hand. Now. And together, they leapt into the night. They hit the ground hard, rolling through the marsh grass. Pain shot through Mariah's side, knocking the breath from her lungs, but she forced herself up. The tower collapsed behind them with an earth-shaking crash, a cloud of splinters and rusted metal raining down. For a moment, silence. Then, dragging. The creatures were still moving, still crawling from the wreckage, their whispers swelling like the tide. Tasha hauled Mariah to her feet. Run. And so they did, into the night, into the unknown, chased by the ocean's children who wanted nothing more than to drag them back into the deep. They didn't know how long they ran. Branches clawed at their arms, mud splattered up their legs, their lungs burned with every ragged breath. The dragging whispers never faded completely, always just behind them, like the ocean itself was pursuing. Finally, the ground hardened. The marsh gave way to gravel, then to cracked asphalt glowing faintly under the moon. A road. Mariah stumbled onto it, collapsing to her knees, her chest heaving. We made it. Tasha bent over, hands on her thighs, her breath sharp and uneven. Don't celebrate yet. Mariah followed her gaze. The road stretched out in both directions, empty, endless. No headlights, no engine hum, no sign of life. Just silence, and the faint, unrelenting crash of waves in the distance. Tasha swore under her breath. Which way? Mariah shook her head wildly. I don't know. I don't know this place. The silence broke. A sound, faint at first, then growing. Not dragging this time, but steady, squelch, 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 like wet feet slapping asphalt. From the left, in the pale wash of moonlight, shapes emerged. Mariah's heart plummeted. The footprints. Dozens of them, scattered across the road, glistening wet. Some small, some impossibly large, the water still dripping from their impressions as though freshly made. Tasha grabbed Mariah's arm, pulling her the other direction. Go. They sprinted down the cracked asphalt, their feet pounding in rhythm with their frantic hearts. The road wound upward, flanked by drooping pines that whispered in the breeze. Behind them, the voices rose again. Mariah. Mariah choked back a sob. They won't stop. Then we don't stop either. Tasha barked, though her voice shook with fear. The road bent, and suddenly, headlights. Mariah cried out, almost collapsing from relief. A pair of beams cut through the trees ahead, growing brighter, the rumble of an engine following close behind. A car. They flailed their arms, screaming, help. Please. Their voices cracked, hoarse, desperate. The vehicle slowed. An old pickup, paint-chipped, its headlights dim but steady. The driver was a heavy-set man in his 60s, a cigarette dangling from his mouth. He leaned out the window, eyes narrowing. You girls lost? Mariah nearly sobbed with relief. Please. You have to help us. There's something. Tasha grabbed her arm, cutting her off. Just get us out of here. The man studied them for a long moment. His gaze flicked over their torn clothes, their mud-streaked faces, their wild eyes. Then he jerked his head. Get in the back. They didn't argue. They scrambled into the rusted truck bed, collapsing against the metal as the pickup lurched forward. The wind whipped their hair, the engine rattled, and for the first time since Jason disappeared, Mariah dared to believe they might live. But then she noticed. The man wasn't driving away from the coast. He was driving toward it. Mariah's stomach dropped. She banged on the rear window, screaming, no. Wrong way. The other way. The man didn't turn. His cigarette glowed red as he inhaled, the ember lighting his profile in brief flashes. His lips curled into a grim line. Only one road out here, he said, his voice carrying faintly through the open window. And it always leads back to the sea. Tasha's eyes widened in horror. Stop the truck, she screamed, pounding her fists against the cab. But the engine only roared louder, the headlights bouncing as the road dipped downhill. Ahead, the trees parted. The moonlit ocean sprawled before them, vast and silver, the tide reaching higher than it should, lapping hungrily at the asphalt. The pickup didn't slow. The water crept closer, the foam glowing pale in the beams of the headlights. And on the wet sand, lined up as if waiting for them, stood the shapes. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. Jason. Luis. Others they didn't recognize. All pale, water-swollen, their eyes bottomless pits of black. Mariah's scream tore through the night as the truck barreled toward the surf. And the tide reached up to meet them. The truck's tires hit the wet sand with a hiss, spraying brine and grit. The ocean loomed closer with every second, black and heaving, swallowing the horizon. Mariah gripped the sides of the truck bed so hard her nails split. The headlights cut across the water, catching faces, dozens of them, standing knee-deep in the surf. Their mouths moved in unison, whispering words that the wind carried inland. Come back. Come back. Come back. Stop the truck. Tasha screamed again, hammering her fists against the cab's rear window. You're going to kill us. The driver didn't answer. His shoulders hunched, his cigarette ember glowing as he puffed, steady and calm. His hands gripped the wheel with grim finality, as though he wasn't driving toward death but toward a duty. Mariah's chest seized. The air was thick, damp, impossible to swallow. She scrambled forward, slamming her fists on the roof of the cab. Let us out. Please. We'll do anything. The driver finally spoke, his voice muffled through the glass. A debt's a debt. The sea takes what it's owed. Tasha's eyes went wide. He's giving us to them. No. Mariah screamed, the word breaking in her throat. She searched wildly for anything she could use. The truck bed was empty but for a rusted toolbox bolted to the side. She lurched toward it, fingers clawing at the latch. It popped open, spilling a jumble of wrenches and tools across the metal floor. She seized the heaviest, an iron crowbar, and dragged herself to the rear window. Tasha caught on instantly. She braced against the side of the truck as Mariah raised the crowbar and swung. The glass shattered with an explosion of shards. The driver jerked, his cigarette tumbling from his lips. What the? Mariah swung again, striking his shoulder. He yelped, losing control of the wheel. The truck swerved violently, tires screaming as they dug into wet sand. Jump! Tasha shouted. Mariah didn't think. She hurled herself from the truck bed, hitting the sand hard, her body rolling over sharp shells and rocks. Pain blazed through her side, but she forced herself up, half running, half crawling. Behind her, Tasha leapt. She hit badly, her ankle twisting with a sickening crack. She cried out but dragged herself forward, teeth clenched against the pain. The truck barreled ahead driverless, its headlights flaring across the water. For a moment, it looked like it might plunge straight into the ocean. But at the last second, the driver wrenched the wheel, sending the vehicle skidding sideways. It crashed onto its side with a thunderous boom, the cab half submerged. The sea surged forward, swallowing it greedily. Mariah staggered to Tasha, hauling her up by the arm. Come on, we have to move. But the tide was already rushing in unnaturally fast, curling around their ankles like grasping hands. And from the waves, the figures advanced. Jason. Luis. Others. Their mouths gaping open, whispering the same word over and over, their voices layered until it became one endless drone. Back. 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 Mariah dragged Tasha inland, her muscles screaming. The water surged higher, soaking their legs, pulling at them. Behind, she could hear the sloshing steps of the drowned things as they followed, relentless, patient. Tasha's breaths came ragged, her face contorted in pain. I can't run. Yes you can. Mariah sobbed. Please, just a little farther. They stumbled up the dune, the sand collapsing beneath their weight. Every step forward felt stolen, every breath a fight. The tide chased them, higher than it should be, unnatural and greedy. Mariah risked one glance back. She wished she hadn't. The driver had been pulled from the wreck, dragged upright in the surf. His eyes were wide, mouth gasping, but already filling with black water. The figures swarmed him, their hands sinking into his skin as though pulling apart clay. He screamed, a sound torn away by the waves, until his body was nothing but another shadow among theirs. Mariah turned, sobbing, dragging Tasha with everything she had. Finally, the ground leveled. They collapsed behind a dune, the roar of the surf muffled but still present, ever present, as though it lived inside their skulls. Tasha clutched her ankle, teeth gritted against the pain. Her face was pale, her lips trembling. We're not gonna make it. Mariah seized her shoulders, shaking her. Don't you say that. We just have to last till morning, that's it. Someone will find us. Mariah. Tasha's voice cracked, but her eyes were steady. They don't stop. Morning, night, it doesn't matter. The sea doesn't sleep. The words sank into Mariah's chest like stones. She wanted to argue, to scream, to deny, but the tide's whispering voices carried across the dunes, proving her right. The ocean wasn't retreating. It was coming farther inland. The night stretched long, an endless tide of fear. Mariah and Tasha huddled behind the dune, the sand cool against their backs. The ocean's whisper never faded, it lapped at the edges of their minds as insistently as the waves clawing inland. Each crash seemed closer, each retreat shorter, as though the sea had decided, no more boundaries. Mariah's body shook, not from cold but from exhaustion and terror. She kept her arms locked tight around Tasha, who trembled with pain from her swollen ankle. The stars overhead blurred through Mariah's tears. We'll go inland, Mariah whispered. Deeper. It can't follow us forever. It's just water. But even as she said it, she didn't believe it. Tasha's eyes glimmered in the dark. It's not water. It's something older than us. Older than anything. The tide is just, its skin. Mariah pressed her hands over her ears. Stop. Please. I can't. Her words were cut off by a sound. Not waves this time. Voices. But not distorted, not waterlogged. Human. Carrying faintly across the dunes, drifting like smoke. Mariah and Tasha froze. Help. This way. Mariah's heart lurched. She crawled up the dune, ignoring the sting of sand in her palms. On the other side, down in a shallow hollow between dunes, she saw them. 4 people. 2 men, 2 women. Campers maybe, or hikers. They carried flashlights that cut trembling cones of light through the dark. Their clothes were mud-streaked, their faces pale with fear. We're not alone, Mariah whispered, half in relief, half in disbelief. Tasha struggled upright, leaning against the dune. Or it's another trick. Mariah shook her head. No, they're real. They have to be. Before Tasha could protest, Mariah was already sliding down the dune, her voice cracking as she shouted, "Hey! Over here!" The figures spun, beams of light blinding her. One of the men stumbled forward, relief plain on his face. "Thank God," he said. "We thought we were the only ones." The women hurried up too, their expressions frantic, human. One of them clutched Mariah's arm. "Did you see them too? The things in the water?" Mariah nearly sobbed in relief. "Yes. Yes, we saw them. She glanced back up the dune. "Tasha, it's okay. They're like us. But Tasha didn't move. She stared down, suspicion hardening her features. Prove it, she called, her voice sharp. The strangers blinked up at her, confused. What? One of the women asked. Prove you're human, Tasha said. Her voice cracked, but her grip on the branch tightened. Say something they wouldn't know. The four strangers exchanged bewildered looks. Mariah's heart pounded. Tasha. Say it. Tasha shouted. The man who had spoken first lifted his hands. Okay. My name's Aaron. This is Clara, Ben, and Nadine. We were camping by the marsh when we saw them. His voice trembled. They dragged our friend away. We've been running since. Mariah's breath shook. She wanted to believe. God, she wanted to. But then Nadine tilted her head. Her eyes caught the moonlight wrong, flat, black, reflective. Mariah froze. Tasha's voice dropped to a whisper. Mariah. Get away from them. But it was too late. Nadine's mouth stretched wide, far wider than a jaw should allow. A hiss spilled out, wet and bubbling. Clara's hand on Mariah's arm tightened, the grip suddenly too strong, nails biting deep. Mariah screamed. The flashlights fell, beams rolling across the sand as the strangers' bodies twisted. Their skin glistened, slick with salt, patches sloughing away to reveal pale flesh beneath. Their voices merged, whispering the same word the others had. Back. 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 Mariah wrenched free, clawing up the dune, sand collapsing beneath her frantic hands. Tasha reached down, hauling her the last few feet. The false campers scrambled after them, movements jerky and inhuman, hands digging into the sand like claws. Run! Tasha screamed. They fled again, back into the night, chased not just by the tide but by the very faces of hope twisted into betrayal. Behind them, the ocean roared. And this time, it sounded like laughter. They ran until their lungs felt like they would burst. Mariah's legs ached, sand grinding into cuts on her feet, but she didn't dare slow. Tasha limped beside her, teeth clenched against the pain in her ankle, half dragged by sheer willpower. The false campers were behind them still, their wet, guttural whispers echoing across the dunes. The sound of sand collapsing under their unnatural movements carried in every direction, making it impossible to tell how close they were. Mariah's mind reeled. There was no one else. No help. Not campers, not drivers, only masks the tide wore, lures cast from the sea. How do we fight this? Mariah gasped, her voice breaking. How do we fight water? Tasha didn't answer at first, her eyes narrowed, her breath shallow. Finally, she spat, we don't. We endure. Until the sea gets tired of us. Mariah nearly sobbed. What if it never does? Then we die fighting, not drowning. The dune gave way to scrubland. The sand thinned into patches of dirt, and the faint glimmer of man-made structure appeared in the distance, a shack, leaning and weathered, but standing. Mariah pointed with a trembling hand. There. They staggered toward it, every step a battle. Behind them, the whispers grew louder, joined by the dragging scrape of something larger than the others. The tide itself seemed to pulse closer, waves breaking higher, the hiss of foam carried even inland. The shack's door hung half off its hinges, but it was shelter. They burst inside, slamming it shut, pushing an old dresser across the entrance. The smell of mildew and rot filled the air. Inside was darkness. Dust. Broken furniture, rusted cans, a lantern hanging crooked from a nail. Mariah collapsed against the wall, sobbing into her hands. Tasha limped to the lantern, shaking it. To her shock, it rattled with oil. She grabbed matches from a shelf and struck one. The lantern flickered to life, casting a trembling glow across the shack. And revealed the walls. Every inch of them was carved with words, gouged deep into the wood. "Don't answer, don't." And over again, in uneven, frantic script. "The sea is hungry." Mariah clapped her hands to her mouth, eyes wide. "Someone was here before us." Tasha's voice was hoarse. "And they didn't make it out." The shack shuddered suddenly. A slam against the door rattled the dresser. The lantern swung, shadows lurching across the carvings. Another slam. Then another. The whispers seeped through the cracks in the boards, layered and endless. "Jason. Luis." Luis's laugh turned into a hiss. Jason's old sarcastic tone warped into pleading. "Come back, Mariah, we miss you." Mariah's tears spilled over. She pressed her hands against her ears, rocking back and forth. "Make it stop, make it stop." Tasha grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at her. "They're not real. They're not them. It's the sea wearing their faces. Do you hear me?" The dresser cracked. Wet fingers pried through the splintering wood. Mariah's scream tore through the shack. Tasha raised the lantern high, her eyes blazing. "Then we burn it," she hissed. She hurled the lantern against the wall. Flames erupted, racing across the dry wood, catching on the carvings, lighting them in violent orange. The shack filled with smoke instantly, the heat pressing down on them. The creatures shrieked outside, a chorus of inhuman wails. Some clawed at the burning walls, their hands hissing as fire devoured them. Others dragged back, retreating into the shadows. The shack became an inferno, the air choking, sparks raining down. Mariah coughed, eyes stinging. "We'll burn alive." "Better that than drowning," Tasha shouted. She seized Mariah's hand, dragging her toward the back window. They smashed through the rotting frame, tumbling into the sand outside. Behind them, the shack roared as it collapsed inward, flames rising like a beacon against the night. The whispers fell silent. For the first time in days, silence. Mariah lay on the sand, chest heaving, tears streaming down her face. "We did it," she whispered. "We scared them off. We." But then she saw it. The firelight flickered against the horizon, and revealed not one tide, but two. The ocean had split. Water surged inland from both directions, curling around the dunes, swallowing the scrubland. And in the middle of that black, endless flood, the shapes returned. Hundreds now. Their silhouettes swaying, whispering, patient. Tasha gripped Mariah's hand, her jaw set, her eyes shining in the firelight. "We run. One last time." Mariah nodded, though her whole body shook. The tide didn't chase them anymore. It simply waited. The world had narrowed to fire and flood. Behind them, the shack collapsed into a pillar of sparks. Around them, the sea closed in from both sides, rushing inland, swallowing dunes and scrub. The tide was no longer something that came and went, it was everywhere, rising, unstoppable. Mariah and Tasha stumbled across the narrowing stretch of dry land, their hands locked together, their bodies battered and failing. The whispering chorus grew louder, layered voices echoing with perfect, terrible harmony. "Back. Back. Back." The figures stood in the water, row upon row, stretching into the horizon. Faces they once knew, Jason, Luis, the driver, the false campers, merged with strangers, generations claimed by the tide. All waiting. All watching. Mariah's tears blurred the world. "There's nowhere left. There has to be." Tasha snapped, though her voice cracked. "We don't stop. Not until we can't move anymore." They pushed forward, the water lapping higher with every step. Mariah's calves ached, her chest burned. Tasha limped badly, her broken ankle dragging, but she didn't let go of Mariah's hand. Ahead, a rise of ground. Barely a hill, barely anything, but higher than the flood. They scrambled up, collapsing at the top. From there, they could see everything. The ocean stretched endlessly, not as a line of horizon anymore but as a circle closing around them. The land they thought safe was already an island, shrinking by the minute. Mariah's sobs tore from her throat. It's over. There's no way out. We're already theirs. Tasha pulled her close, gripping her shoulders, forcing her to meet her eyes. Even through pain and exhaustion, her gaze was steady, fierce. Listen to me, she said. We are not theirs. Not yet. Not until we step into that water ourselves. The voices rose, shrill and insistent. Mariah. Tasha, come back. Mariah clamped her hands over her ears, but the voices pushed through her skull, rattling her thoughts. Jason's laugh. Louis's teasing voice. Her mother's lullaby, long buried in memory. They knew her now, every crack, every weakness. The tide surged higher, foam hissing up the hill's base. The first of the figures began climbing, their black eyes unblinking, their mouths stretched open in silent invitation. Tasha seized a jagged piece of driftwood lodged in the sand, raising it like a spear. Then we fight. Mariah's heart lurched. She wanted to collapse, to give up, to sink into the water and let it take her. But something in Tasha's voice, the defiance, the refusal, ignited a spark deep in her chest. She grabbed a broken branch nearby, lifting it with trembling arms. We fight. The first figure reached them, Jason's face, bloated and pale, eyes black voids. His mouth opened, whispering her name. Mariah screamed and swung. The branch cracked across his face, splitting skin that oozed brine instead of blood. He toppled backward, vanishing into the flood. Another climbed up. Luis. His familiar smile twisted into something grotesque. Tasha rammed her driftwood through his chest, pinning him before shoving him back down the slope. But more came. They climbed over each other, endless, tireless, their whispers merging into a roar. The hill shrank beneath the rising tide, the firelight behind them sputtering into smoke. Mariah's arms shook with every swing, but she kept fighting, every strike fueled by rage, grief, and the desperate refusal to surrender. Tasha fought beside her, blood running down her leg, her breaths shallow but her spirit unbroken. The water reached their knees. Then their waists. The figures circled them, their faces inches away, whispering, whispering, whispering. Hands brushed their arms, their hair, tugging gently, as though coaxing them into the embrace of the sea. Mariah's scream tore from her chest, raw and furious. She swung until her branch snapped in half, until her arms went numb, until she could no longer see where the tide ended and the creatures began. The world was water, voices, endless pulling. Then, silence. Mariah opened her eyes. She was lying on sand. Dry sand. Sunlight blinded her, warm and sharp. The roar of the ocean was distant, normal, like any other summer morning. Beside her, Tasha stirred, coughing, sand clinging to her face. Her ankle was still twisted, her body battered, but she was alive. They sat up slowly, staring out at the beach. The tide was calm. Ordinary. The water lapped gently at the shore, sparkling under the morning sun. No footprints. No whispers. No figures waiting in the surf. Just the sea. Mariah's lips trembled. Did we survive? Tasha's eyes scanned the horizon, her expression unreadable. We lasted the night. Mariah turned to her, desperate. Then it's over. Tasha looked back at the water. The waves rolled in, steady and patient. No, she whispered. The tide always comes back.